Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us at Poetry and Prose. This is my favorite session that we typically have, open mics. And I love it because we get to hear everyone's work and get feedback and have lively discussions. I would love to start off the meeting with a little piece. It's quite short, but I really love this poem. It's by Brian Giffam. The Almost Love Poem of Eloise and Kofi. When Eloise tells Kofi she wants a divorce, he sits naked on the kitchen floor, skinning an ox tongue to prepare Eloise's favorite dish. Blood trickles down his fingers onto the floor. This is not in my head. In my head, the bruised organs is in the hands of Eloise, and she almost loves Kofi. What a strange word, almost. I look at the rain clouds and they almost seem to stagger. When did I last have a drink? My stomach feels heavy and a urinous smell stays where Kofi sits naked. So what if Eloise wants a divorce? She is made of stubbornness. Kofi is not thinking about the ox as he marinates its tongue in a basin of tomato juice. Eloise stands there, insisting on a divorce as the blood mixes onto the tomato juice. A pause. Kofi has a chance to recover his patience and pull it over himself. They have many times pressed their bodies together and peel them apart. Elation. Love is a wretched, wretched thing. Eloise wishes Kofi would put down the tongue and say something. I would love to open the floor for discussion on that piece. If anyone cares to jump in on your thoughts.
You say you lay a lot of things on the table there, you know. Because, you know, the thing about that bit that you did, it sets you thinking, you know, it have a lot of possibilities. So thanks for starting us off by tickling our brains.
Okay, if there are no other comments or shares, I really liked the piece. I love the fact that he kept saying the name. And I love the last line that she wishes he would put the tongue down and say something. So for me, that's really impactful. It says a lot probably about the relationship. Also says a lot. It's also a play on the fact that he's been silent this whole time and everything's going on in his head. So that's my little comment on it. And with that, I'm going to hand over to our chair for this afternoon, Vishnu Gosine.
I am the chairing.
Sorry,
Okay.
I got the email a bit late. I don't know if maybe you didn't get it.
No.
Okay, well, you are capable chairman, man. You could handle that, and you could do a little introduction.
I do have the program in front of me.
Vishnu, if you feel underprepared, myself or Motilal can take over. It's cool.
Okay. I know I'm supposed to introduce Dr. Roth. I know that part and read a poem.
No problem. Well, I will continue and we can split as we go about that. I'm going to introduce the reader for this afternoon, Vilma. Vilma will be reading a memorable Boxing Day in the 60s with Gilpins. Gilpins. Velma, looking forward to your piece.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Now, this might take about 6 minutes. I hope I don't take too much of your time or bore anyone. Try to cut it down, but this was it, right? So, good afternoon again. A memorable Boxing Day in the 60s using Gilpins by Vilma Seusankar. 9-year-old Sarah woke up one morning feeling elated and excited. For a few moments, she had no idea why she felt like that. So she sat up from her bed and took a few deep breaths, and now she remembered. Oh, yes, she said to herself, today is Boxing Day. And she smiled broadly as she remembered the day before, which was Christmas Day. Sarah and her family lived in Sao Tres in La Romaine, a village south of San Fernando. Sarah's mind was now completely taken up with the wonderful memory of all that had happened yesterday. As she looked up, she looking like a fairy story scenario. Strips of differently colored crepe paper were curled and tied together in the middle of the roof from the four sides to form a knot, from where differently colored balloons were also hung in a cluster. That decor was initiated on Christmas Eve night by Sarah's brother-in-law, who was married to her eldest sister, Gracie. They had come with their two small children from distant Chaguanas to spend Christmas with their Sao Tres family. Sarah's other siblings had also helped to decorate the room by sticking new Christmas pattern paper on the thin, hollow middle wall that was called a padnaf. I don't know where they get that name from. So the place was looking beautiful. Sarah thought of yesterday's Christmas Day meals that seemed like a banquet compared to the generally dry food they ate during the year. Home-baked bread, cakes, chicken and pork, curried homegrown yard duck, and dal puri roti were thoroughly enjoyed. All the baked items were done in a handmade metal oil barrel oven that was heated by a dirt fireside from below and using dried wood as fuel, right? On Christmas Eve night. So that all that was cooked on Christmas Eve night. Sarah was convinced that no store-bought oven could ever make better tasting goodies that the home version did. She also remembered playing yesterday with the Trace children, sharing toys that they got as gifts, drinking a whole bottle of Solo sweet drink, eating a whole apple along with egg cake that Mama made. It was all very exciting to her mind. So this morning, as Sarah prepared to enjoy this Boxing Day in a like manner as yesterday, nothing would have prepared her for what was going to happen. She got up from the homemade grass-filled mattress that she was sitting on, where she and her siblings slept at nights, not having any beds, any real beds. This mattress was in the living room, so-called, the tiny little hut. Hey, wake up today, she said as she poked her sister, who was a few years older than her. Lily was still dozing and emitting gentle snores. So they both got up, rolled and tied up the mattress, leaned it on a wall, and went outside to cut 6-inch hibiscus twigs that were called as datuans to brush their teeth. They would chew one side, and when it was chewed up, they smeared a bit of toothpaste there and roughly brushed their teeth as best as they could. At this time, the place was quiet, as the men who had drunk their fill of rum the day before were still hungover and lying in their homes nearby. Suddenly, a sounding like a male was loudly using words that implied some sort of infidelity was taking place in the trace. All who heard the voice repeating the accusation stopped whatever they were doing, their ears now perked up with great interest. So we look back a bit. The Trace's residents, to an extent not so great, were made up of two families that lived in different houses. Those two families were at loggerheads because one teenage boy from one family was in a love relationship with a girl from the other family, just like Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And the elders did not approve of that as a future marriage alliance. This morning, because of that, dashed out of in a very was a cutlass, also called as a gilpin by the local villagers. The gilpin brandisher started cussing and loudly threatening the boy's family. Soon, that prompted other members of the two families to follow suit, shouting obscenities, verbal threats to kill, sometimes punctuated by adversaries pinning each other on the ground, thrashing and running wildly up and down the trace. They carried on for the entire day. The Christmas Day rum, still latent in the men's heads, kept prodding them in their hungover state. But thankfully, as the fight finally ended, no one was actually chopped. Certainly boxed, but not chopped. All stopped their selfishness and their foolishness and went to their houses as darkness approached, as their wives and children pulled them in. Sarah and Lily were so scared during that violent day because they couldn't foresee what would have happened at any point. Sarah, being only age 9, younger than Lily, was so traumatized mentally that she still remembers with fear that Boxing Day in the 60s up to this day. Thank you. The end. Wilma, Seusankar.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor for comments at this time.
No, Vilma, that you could be talking about me and my village here, you know, because every Christmas time in those days, particularly in the late 50s, in the 60s, you know, in the evening after these people drink their rum, some of the older men, the fathers and all that, and the choral staff, and they would have these gilpins pulling. Fortunately, I've never seen any blood shed in my village, but used to have what we used to call carrying, which means grand charging. So you take me right back to my little village in Pinal in the early 60s. Thank you for that story.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to say that the scenario that she painted could be Guyana at the same time. Remember, I'm from Guyana, and the entire story could have been set in a part of Guyana. It was very real for many societies similar.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else would like to jump in?
What I tried to put together is a date to when these things happen, and if the society at all has evolved, whether what she's describing there or what people similar describe the same incidents that takes place perhaps in the 30s or 40s or 50s, if those things still obtain today. And that's one of my questions. I mean, we wrote about people living on the banks of a river, and he painted a naked life of lifestyle there. That no longer exists. And I think that since independence, we have evolved a little bit into a little more civilized set of people. In my own growing up days in California, I live in a small enclave village. And what used to happen is that the adults, well, they had son-in-laws, and they would come home and they will drink and eat and sing and be drunk. And that was the lifestyle there. I can't recall in my growing up there at all that there was any fight something, or even as Motilal Boodoosingh says, carrying. But it was interesting. It was interesting, the raw life in those days. And actually, I took that kind of celebration into my adult life, thinking that adults perhaps behave that way, but it wasn't so at all times. All right, thanks. That's my piece.
Thanks, Vishnu. When was it set in?
California, Esperanza, California, Central Trinidad. Esperanza is a small village east of California, and there used to be a sugar factory there. It's no longer there. It's close to Brecken Castle.
Okay. And Vilma, your piece is what time period and set?
In the 60s.
The 60s.
Yeah. It was
Okay.
like, yeah, let me see, about 64, 63, 64, thereabouts. I would
So
have been
we-
9 years old.
So we are 60 years away from that.
You know, I take
I believe
point,
though
though.
that we're not, I mean, in terms of it, it's pretty much universal because I think that still happens in today's world.
yes, only that the choice of weapons might be guns. But I take Vishnu point, you know, because in my village, what used to happen to sometimes, Vishnu say, a lot of his son-in-laws used to come to the father-in-law's house. Like the grandfather, he would invite all his son-in-laws and grandchildren and all that. And things would be fine. You would singing and beating drum and beating table and all that. And then later on, as the evening comes and the liquor takes over, then the quarrel would start, and then that scene could play off. So I think I think that up to the 60s, in the early 60s, I was witness of some of that.
Actually, the in-law didn't, Sarah's family was not involved in the matter. It was the neighbors who had, like one family had come from Felicity, right? And they had a few brothers living there. And then the other family was there. So those were the two warring families. Sarah's family was not involved in. But you know, I had to kind of cut it short because of the time limit. So
Okay, thank you, Vilma. So let's move on.
Yeah, if I could just add
Sure.
to what Vishnu was saying about in terms of identifying the setting, you did use a couple some details which gave people an idea of the setting when you talked about the homemade oven, right? Which makes better bread, better ham than other things. And you talked about the grass-filled mattress. But I know about fiber mattress, because fiber mattress, the fiber used to be choking you all the time when you lie down. And that one, right, Vishnu? So these are clues that gave an idea of the setting. I just wanted to add. So she does have clues. There are clues in the story which gives an idea of the setting.
Thank you, Krishna. You just I can't resist this, but you know, I know about gada, you know, where you actually there used to be a type of grass. We used to call it bed grass. A kind of razor grass, like can you cut that?
Oh, grass. Yeah, I don't know about grass.
And you use the rice bags
yes.
from the shop. You use the rice bags and the grass, and you make what in Trinidad we used to call a gada, and that used to be your mattress. I don't know if Vishnu could remember that, but I certainly slept on many gadas.
I know about the flower bags. When you stitch them together, you get a sheet to cover with.
That is
Or
cheddar.
spread.
Yes.
Huh?
That
The cheddar.
cheddar, yes. But
Yeah, the cheddar,
gada,
yes.
we used to use the rice bags,
Uh-huh.
the
Well,
jute bags that is more durable. Okay, that's for me. Thanks.
All right.
It also shows the socioeconomic setting as well of the residents of what's with.
Correct. Correct, Birch.
All right, well, we'll move on if there are no one else that wants to give a share. Looking forward to hearing Cynthia's piece. Cynthia, A Story of Two Fires.
Thank you. Yes, I'm right here. So we are going to change the setting a little bit. Still in the Caribbean. This is Catastrophe, St. Lucia fire of 19th June 1948. And I found an excerpt. You know, Google is my good friend. So I got an excerpt from the West Indian Crusader, July 10, 1948. And the headline was Castries fire devoured 75% of Castries and rendered 2,000 homeless. And this is from Google. The first fire The fire alarm sounded shortly after 8 p.m. and by 8:30 p.m., the fire was out of control, so that for full 10 hours, the fire spreading wherever the wind listed. After the first half hour, hardly less than 4 to 6 buildings were ablaze at the same time and very often traveling in different directions. Even if there was water, there would not have been enough equipment to fight a fire of such magnitude. Of course, with water and proper equipment, the fire could not have progressed so rapidly and spread so widely. Nevertheless, let no one think for a moment that the fire was not fought. For if it were not fought, the fire could not have been checked by the St. Joseph's Convent on Niku Street and at 59 St. Louis Street, and were it not checked at these points, perhaps not a house would have been left standing in the town. So that's from the archives. And now my bit of the story continues. As the fire, now I was about 6 years old, going on 7. But these are my memories. As the fire gained ground in Castries, my mother started to pack clothes, especially for her 2 young daughters. My sister Leonie was just short of 3 years old. The Castries fire was 19th June 1948, and my sister was going to be 3 on 25th June 1948. I was going to be 7 on 4th August 1948. Some of the items were saved from the Methodist Mission House. My father was a Methodist minister there, so we lived at the Methodist Mission House in Castries. But Mummy concentrated on putting blankets out for the children to be wrapped in. So in the evening, we children were sent across town through the square to shelter Dr. Maurice Byer's house. Our parents came over later. Now, this is where I describe for you the atmosphere. I remember that it was dark, dense, smoky. There was, of course, in those days, no electricity or running water. So right now it's difficult for us to imagine that, but that is the setting in which this Castries fire took place. Derek Walcott's mother used to attend church, the Methodist church in Castries, and she came over and saved my mother's music stool with drawers of sheet music and music books. Mummy played the organ. Then fast forward to the next few weeks, we lived for some weeks at Mrs. Flossac's Hotel Saint Antoine up the Morne, for those who know St. Lucia. And after a few months, Mummy and the 2 children, my sister and I, returned to Trinidad. Daddy continued because he had to continue to serve out his term at the church. But while we were at that hotel, I remember very well that I contracted malaria, and I remember I had to be given Atabrin tablets, and they were very bitter. So one footnote to that short story is, since then I seldom save things for a special occasion, because our parents had bought us a lovely doll's house set in cartons, and we had not been allowed to play with it more than maybe 3 or 4 times before the Castries fire took it forever. So since then, I don't put off things and put off enjoying something. Most of the time, I say, well, let me just enjoy whatever is there now. So that was one fire. So that was 1948. Now, the second fire, to take a Methodist manse in which I had lived, fast forward to 17th December 2021. Late on that night, I was sent a video made by George Leacock of Tobago. The Scarborough Methodist manse, which had been condemned as the residence of the Methodist minister, was well alight. flames rising into the air and crackling of the wood of the building audible. As I had lived there as a toddler near the end of World War II when blimps were passing overhead, this news was a hard knock for me. For the entire day following this fire, I was gloomy. To hear the fire was one thing. To be able to recall having lived in that Scarborough Methodist manse was quite another matter, since although I left at only 3 years old, I do have a number of memories of the interior and exterior of the manse, where I was given goat's milk to drink and farine and cassava to eat. I have a few photos, black and white, of myself as a child on the veranda of that Methodist mission house. So it affected me because that Methodist manse had been a part of my life. I remember writing to my aunts who lived in Trinidad. I would run to my mother or father to ask how to spell a word and go back to writing in crabby letters. The letters did get to Trinidad because I located one of them some years ago, right here in the family home where I live now. So the effect of having lost yet another Methodist mission house to fire left me in a sober mood on Saturday, 18th December, 2021. So I put this into writing in January 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for your share. I'm going to open the floor up now to any comments.
Derek Walcott wrote a poem called A City's Death by Fire, and it was published in his collection In a Green Night. I'm wondering too if he borrowed from that same fire. Cynthia?
I am certain that he did. Because it was, it was a most memorable event. The entire city of Catastrophe pretty much was just taken by fire. There was no water. And I remember there was unrest among the workers too. I didn't know all about that, but I do remember that atmosphere. Smoky and dark and lanterns and people scurrying away, Oh yes, that would have influenced Derek Walcott a lot. I remember recently when he came to Trinidad, well, when I say recently, fairly recently, and I was teaching and he came to talk to the sixth form. And I said, now what can I say to somebody who is so famous and accomplished that he would not have heard before? I thought that a welcome with just the normal words would not have made an impression. So I welcomed him and I told him about the night that his mother had saved the music stool of my mother from the mission house. And he spun around and looked at me because he, of course, probably didn't know anything about that, She just came to the mission house and helped in any way. And I said, well, that woke him up because who else would have been able to tell him such a story?
Yes, and it had your ranking high. The Walcott's mother, and then later to interact with Derek. Yes, Vishnu. I see it. I know the poem came to me too, and I see Vishnu going, he gonna find out Derek Walcott book. Very good.
We all did work at that university.
Okay, well, we'll move along. Cynthia, thank you so much for your share.
You're welcome.
And next, we have Krishna, Between the Weight and the Catastrophe.
Yeah, I was waiting, yes, between the weight and the catastrophe. I'm going to read from a work which represents my foray into epic poetry. The work is entitled Song of a Barefoot Soul. There are 130 segments in it. I'm going to read from segment 71. It is void of punctuation, except for the first word, which I put in capital. I start with capital letter. And the last line, I ended with a full stop. So the whole thing, which runs for 174 pages, it's really one sentence. To reflect the idea that it's one song of a barefoot soul. So it is about writing, it's about the imagination, it's about the mind. I experimented to a limited extent with the stream of consciousness technique in this work, where I am writing and then I jump to something else. Wherever the mind is going, I jump so, and then I come back so, and then I go so. So between the weight and the catastrophe, this segment led off from the previous segment. So I'll just read the last 4 lines of the previous segment, which goes like this. I see the chopped forearms each time I hear the voice, the horror returns. The chopped forearms refer to an incident I saw as a child in Sangre Grande, where there was a chopping, and they covered the body, but they didn't cover the whole thing. And as a child, I saw that. So it really hit my consciousness. I see the chopped forearms each time I hear the voice, the horror returns, and I grow moody. She asked if I was into drugs, the way I shifted so easily from one extreme to another. I warned her it had to do with the way I saw things. It took a flicker of an experience to behold it in its entirety, run through the whole gamut of emotions joined to that flicker. I thought it my gift, and sometimes it turned out to be my curse. My imagination had this habit of always breaking loose and running wild. The dark terrorized me. With every death, I was destined to live through the nightmares that ran like serials for many nights. I dreaded making the way to the shed. And now, was it my curse? And now my gift. Sometimes the bulb that offered a measure of security would blow just like that. Then ghosts would dance for joy and hands would stretch to grab me and pull me into the hole as heart and feet beat a hasty retreat to the back door. I pulled my way up there, being no steps to climb. They groped for my feet. Always I escaped in the nick of time. Hurriedly drew the bolt safe for the while. I lay on the ground bed and braced myself for the horror. I tried to keep away such superstitious beliefs from their world. Theirs were fears of actual disasters, real tragedies. Their fears knew no hour, no face, and no boundaries, made one question the very pursuit of dreams. In a flash, everything could amount to just nothing. Between the weight and the catastrophe lay the living, and what was devoted to the routine of raising a household, making a living. In this, Marx was right. Alienation went straight to the heart of things. In his quest for progress, mankind denied himself the simple things in life, the mind, the mind. It was around the mind everything revolved. In his own image and likeness, he created this cosmos, whose logic was the logic of his mind. To root out all forms of indiscipline, he pledged as if humans grew like wild grass. Not even a nuclear disaster could right the wrongs this animal inflicts upon himself and this poor universe. It makes one question the very telling of this narrative of the barefoot boy who followed a line that wound its way round a corner that led to a flight of steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments?
My
Sorry.
only is that Krishna wrote this book in 2000,
2000, yes.
2000,
2000.
22 years ago. My question, Krish, is this book available still?
No. I have to see about getting it back publicized.
And the other thing is that it's kind of hard to just comment on something you wrote off the back, because you have to study it. You're like Walcott. You have to study Krishna's poem and then come to a conclusion. But the book is there, very much available by me. I agree. I enjoyed it.
Nice to see you have your copy. I remember you talking about, just the other day, you're talking about some motifs you see in my work. The barefoot boy is one. The idea of the line, somebody following the line of your life, is another. And then another one is the Norwegian, the concept of the Norwegian. These are motifs that you would find running through my works if you happen to pick them up and have a look. That was nice of you to note that, Vish. Yeah. Actually, and this work is like, I wanted to write a post-Biswas novel, which I could never write, and I will never write, about Indians when they moved into the city and what happened to them in city. So it was too much, the pain, whatever, was too much to put in details. And so I had to couch it, codify what I wanted to say. And verse was what offered me that opportunity to codify what happened to the Indians in the city. I'm talking about like Belmont, Port of Spain. Yes, Cynthia.
Ken Jaikaran Singh
Yes.
has a couple of books, and I think some of what he writes about will just fill that gap. What became of the people from the country areas who came to live in Port of Spain? And some of his stories have done that. One was published in 2021. The Carnival is Over, and the second one, The Mark of Cain, was published in 2022, and they're available. And they bridge that sort of gap, the very gap you were speaking of.
Yeah. Well, that's that. Yeah, I have to get copies myself of those works. Any others?
Krish,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Vish, go ahead.
yeah. Is there any criticism on this book? Long criticism, like, I mean?
Yes, one a review came out in the Catholic News when the book came out. A review came out, a complex poem or something like that was the title.
Okay.
Life's Journey in a Complex Poem, something to that effect. I can't remember it, but I have the review.
Okay.
Stored away in my scrapbooks. I have my scrapbooks, and I have, you know, when I used to read poetry in the days of Anson Gonzalez, when I read poetry at Diwali Nagar through you, Vishnu, you know, you have to keep these things, because if you don't keep them, well, I don't know who will.
But when Vilma was reading just now, I thought of Quarantine Thunder by Edgar Mittelholzer, and I saw a similar kind of pattern developing there.
Okay, Chris,
Okay.
you know, as listening to poetry and as the review said, it's complex. But what I want to ask really, because knowing that you are a Belmont boy,
Yeah,
and as a,
born in Belmont, yes.
so I was wondering if you was an East Indian who moved to Belmont.
No, I was born in Belmont. Born in Belmont, but I spent some years in San Grande, and then I returned to Belmont.
Okay.
And then I moved to San Fernando, then I moved to Mayo, then I moved to Chaguanas, and I don't know what my next move will be.
Well, that is the new area you was talking about.
Yeah, yeah, I had no sense of place.
Yeah, you know, they say that a man is the total of his experiences. So I was just
Yeah.
trying to put that and you together. Thanks
Yeah.
for reading.
Can I say something? Can I just interject something here, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mr. Samaroo was talking there, and I remember interviewing a woman one time. I was working with the Mirror at that time, and I interviewed a lady who was begging by the Price Plaza there, right? Not Price, Grand Bazaar. Sorry, she was there begging, and I sat down there and I started talking to her, and she was telling me about her family, who originated from Port of Spain, and the reasons why they had to leave Port of Spain. It was very, very painful to hear. I don't want to tell you all what she told me, but it was very painful, and it started around that 1962 era where new people came into the area and drove them out. I remember that. I just want to mention that. Very painful to listen to.
True.
Okay, Gersh, moving along.
All righty, just waiting for the comments. Okay, so thank you so much for your share. We're gonna move along now to Vishnu. He will be introducing Dr. Shah, and he'll also do a short interview for us.
Okay, I'm here on. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Shah to our audience. Dr. Seeta Shah Roth is a writer of the Demerara series, The Return of Latchmini being her first novel. Guyanese-born lifelong learner, Seeta enjoys immersion in rural communities for photography, cultural participation, and making connections across boundaries of cultures, geography, and ethnicity. She has been an international journalist and a communications practitioner for over 3 decades. Currently, Seeta is a lecturer at the University of Guyana in the Masters in Communication Studies and a thesis supervisor in the Masters in Education and Humanities at the same university. Dr. Shah is a founder and developer of the countrywide network, Guyana Learning Channel and Broadcasting Station, reaching into Guyana's remotest communities. She is a member of the Nadira and Indrani Shah dance troupe, which has been commemorating Indian immigration and Indian arrival day in Guyana since 1979, and have continued in the virtual environment with Nitrajgeet International Virtual Productions this year. She is the daughter of Cyril Shaw, journalist and show business promoter, manager of the Mighty Sparrow for over 50 years, and cultural activist in the Caribbean for more than half a century. Over to you now and the interview.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think you start with the interview. Could you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Okay. I thought you were going to do a reading from your book first.
Okay, then I will do that first. I just wasn't sure. Okay, so I'm looking, sorry.
Let's do a little interview first and then we do the reading, please.
Okay. So, Dr. Shah, you have written this book, Return of Latchmini. Tell us something about that book. I'm pretty much interested in it.
Okay, the journey for developing the research for the writing of this book started from my grandmother, Jack. That was the name she was given at birth, Jack. And what Jack did, when Jack's mother, Latchmini, left Suriname, where she spent 10 years of indentureship before heading back to India in the village of Jamkuri, she left 2 children in Suriname, one child in Suriname, and she took 2 children with her back to India. The son that she left was old enough to have his own job, so his own contract. So Ram and her husband Madari remained to work another contract, and then followed Latchmini with the 2 children and pregnant with a 3rd back to Jamkuri in India, which is in Allahabad. So when my grandmother in Guyana now, I will go through that after how she ended up in Guyana. Jack ended up in Guyana. She was born in a ship coming back to the West Indies. And so she always heard about the father, Madari, and her brother who was left in Suriname. So when she was old enough and free enough, after her husband had died, she started to search for her father and brother in Suriname. And that is a long story that ended up with taking women from Suriname to Guyana to Trinidad as music players in Jag and all of that. So that research started since then, and that would have been in the 1920s. My mother followed the mantle and did the research in the archives of Guyana, in the archives of Suriname and Netherlands, and in the UK before she finally headed to India. She made 10 trips to India before she finally found that village, Jamkuri, where Latchmini left. Latchmini and Madari, that was Madari's village, because they would have moved to Madari's village after Latchmini married Madari from her own village. So.
Okay, Dr. G, do you have any pictures or clear vision of what that village might be in India at the time?
Yes, Mom left a lot of photographs, and it was basically an agricultural village close to the 3 rivers. It had a river itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was the 3 rivers. One was the Ganges, and of course the mythical river too. So that made the 3. And they were planting rice the traditional way. It was mostly a matriarchal village, seemingly, based on Mom's thing, because the women are the ones who worked in the rice fields, who carried the loads, who left very early in the morning, returned early in the evening. And they used traditional methods for planting and reaping the rice.
Okay, so we are talking about Guyana, we are talking about Suriname, we are talking about India. Okay, that and Holland, but Netherlands.
Yes.
What was life like in Suriname if you would have gotten that kind of information during Indian?
Yes. So life in Suriname was a little better, seemingly, than the experience that they had in Guyana. In Suriname, seemingly, it was the same sugar plantation. The dwellings were a little better in a way, even though they were thatch roofs. The houses were separate rather than the lodges that were like houses, apartments joined together, to put it simply, and the range houses rather than the range houses. And somehow they were freer. They went to the market, they took their produce, they planted their gardens. At different times in Guyana, there was different levels of freedom for the Indian indentured servants. but the Suriname could have had the different levels too. But Latchmini, according to the stories, because this is oral tradition, stories passed down from generation to generation, they were allowed to take their greens to the market on Saturdays along with the Creoles to sell in the market. And through that union, it became a union. Through that interaction with the Creoles, they learned the different cultures. They learned the similarities of the drums, the similarities of the religious ceremonies, etc.
I know we could read that all in the book itself when that time comes. But tell me something. I've been to Suriname once, and I know Hindustani is a language, a common language in Suriname. How is it that Hindustani survived in Taki and Dutch and whatever languages you have again, Javanese and whatnot? How come Hindustani survived in Suriname?
Yeah, one of the things that I found is that, and experienced, because I've spent a lot of time in Suriname working in the communities in the Bokapondo region, is that you could see an Afro-Surinamese could speak Hindi.
Okay.
Right. There are some Indo-Surinamese who can't. But one of the reasons the language became, was able to be passed on, because I did several interviews to find out what the people themselves thought was the reason for them retaining the language, is one, they were indentured servants being brought to Suriname long after it was stopped in Guyana.
Oh,
that
okay.
is one. And two, the education system, it was separate. The Hindus were allowed to have their own schools and their own, and to keep their languages. They weren't that inculcated into the Dutch. And that was maybe divide and rule, another strategy for divide and rule. But the Hindus were allowed to retain their cultures and their languages within their own communities, just like the Javanese. And the Hindus did not move forward into the urban areas as did the others.
Okay, Dr. G, I know we could be running against time a little bit too.
Oh, yes.
A copy of the book is you there? Do you have?
Yes, I do have a copy of the book here.
Available in Trinidad? Is it available in Trinidad? Do you know?
Not in Trinidad as yet. No, I will have someone send some from Guyana. It should be in Guyana now. And
Okay.
send them to, I just have to know who to send it to in Trinidad.
Okay. All right. I think we could take a break here, and maybe you could do a short reading from your novel, from your book, and then maybe follow. Okay, thank you.
Good. So I will start a few pages from page 230. Narayan wondered if the boys would really find Latchmini at the big house or on the road, hurt, clutching baby Jack to her chest, his Dolari, his beloved. The first baby he had ever held in his arms was Latchmini's little daughter, such a perfect little human, and her smile. She looked directly into his eyes as if she would see into his very soul. A sound from inside the room brought him out of his reverie, and he realized that Radia was awake. Narayan used the banister to pull himself up, feeling pain rush up his legs from the cut on his foot. Once again, he breathed a sense of relief that he still had pain in his foot, that it was still attached to his leg. How could he be so stupid as to kick out at a laborer brandishing a cutlass at the English manager? Sure, they said that he saved the life of the manager and nearly lost a foot in the process. But what about him now? How will he work? What will his foot, when will his foot heal enough for him to walk as normal? He hauled the cowpoke Latchmini had got for him to use as a walking stick and hopped to the bed. My, Radia rubbed her eyes and looked in the place where her mother usually slept, since they arrived at the lodge less than a month now. "My coming, Baba. Go back to sleep. Come, Baba, sleep, sleep." Narayan sat down on the bed. He placed Radia on her belly and patted her on her back. Radia placed her thumb in her mouth and closed her eyes. She was soon fast asleep. Narayan continued rubbing her back and stared through the window into the moonlight night. Fireflies danced in the shadows under the huge branches of the star apple tree over the narrow canal behind the lodge. The loud sounds of the gong calling the workers to the cane field woke Narayan from the slumber he had fallen into watching the dancing fireflies. He looked around the room. No signs indicating that Mahabir had returned, or Latchmini for that matter. He went to the door as quickly as his injured foot would allow him. Workers were walking up the dam, heading to work as if it was just another day. Narayan looked in the direction of the lodge where Mahabir's friend lived with his family. The boy's father was standing on their steps, staring in the direction of Narayan. Looking back at the sleeping Radia, Narayan hopped down the stairs and headed over to the other lodge, using the walking stick more deftly than he expected. "Your boy see that? He come back yet?" The man stared at Narayan without saying anything. "He and Mahabir went out last night to the big house. He come back home yet?" "Oh, so Mai was right. It's your son. Come and carry my son out in the middle of the night." "Yeah, they went to the big house to search for Mahabir's mother." "So your son took my son to the big house where them white people live to get chopped up like how you get chopped up?" "You know how my foot got chopped? It was one we own who did it." "We own? You just come here. You just come to this estate. You playing bad man and stopping we fight with the master for more money. You're not one we. Where my son? Where my son there?" Narayan jerked back at the venom he heard in the man's voice and the threatening stand from above on the landing, but he stood his ground on the road. So see that not home as yet?" "No. And is my worried bad that something happened to him? Your wife did not come home last night, and you get me son and you son going looking for she? Ask Badri how long his wife gone with a white man and she never came back. Look what happened with Jadu. He chop up his wife and he drink poison. All to dead out. What's different about your wife? She gone to the big white house and not come back last night. So what? Nothing new? Nothing to send we sons out in the middle of the night for? Latchmini went to work. She took her baby with her. She's not a bad person. She's a good woman. Something happened, I tell you. Something happened to prevent her from coming home. Something happened to what? Something happened to she? You're a white man talking so proper. Look, the driver come in. You ask him if you know anything. He'll answer you. You're a big man now with your broke foot. Saving massa makes you famous now. Ask the driver. Here he come now. Narayan looked over his shoulder and saw a big Indian man walking in their direction. He must be a Pathan, thought Narayan, who turned with difficulty. Balancing with the walking stick was not so good with the pain so much this morning. Sir, would you know anything about our two boys who went to search for their mother at the big house last night? They went to search for Latchmini, who went to work at the big house. She did not return last night, sir. The man stopped and stared at Narayan. Then he looked at the walking stick and the bandaged foot. Ah, you Narayan? Yes, sir. Latchmini did not return from working at the big house last night, and her son and his friend went there looking for her last night, sir. They not returned either, sir. A look like a snare flashed across the man's face, but he shrugged and started to walk away. Narayan grabbed onto his hand. Yes, sir. What happened to them, sir? We worried, sir. Tell us, sir. We must know, sir. The man shrugged off Narayan's hand and walked off. Narayan hopped behind him, forgetting pain as he used the walking stick to pull him along like an oar of a boat. But he could not keep up, and the man ignored his cries. Narayan lagged behind, and soon the man was so far in front that Narayan gave up and sat down on the dam, his head in his hands and walking stick in the mud at his side. Narayan, Narayan, is that you, Narayan? What are you doing sitting in the mud like that? Look, an ox cart is coming. You will be knocked down. The overseer had come up and was trying to help Narayan to his feet. He waved the cart to pass along one side, helping Narayan to move towards the other side. The heavy feet of the ox almost crushed Narayan's injured foot. He dragged it away just in time. That was the end of chapter 18. To give you, I will just read one more line to give you an idea of where Latchmini is. Latchmini, this is danger is the title of this chapter, chapter 18. Latchmini was so scared for her baby as the horse cart sped down the road. The fierce wind from the sea had her hair streaming to the left, her Ernie sailing behind, attached to her blouse only by the gold brooch. The salt air stung her eyes. She held on to one hand to the dray cart upright, praying that the metal bracket would hold fast. The other hand grasped the baby in the bag dangling at her chest. Baby Jack had started to cry as she sensed her mother's panic and felt the jerking dray cart.
Thank you very much. Very interesting reading, Doc. You must get a book to Trinidad soon.
I will try.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, the chairpersons, Gershia, Moti.
Thank you so much, Vishnu. We're going to open the floor right now for any comments and shares, any questions you may have.
Yeah, you really
Did
love
everyone
that
during
reading.
the shares. So if you just want to take note, if you're muted.
Yes, I love that story. I can't wait to get a copy of Dr. Seeta's book, and it shows that there's the similarity of the history of the indentures, whether in Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, and also the language, and when Dr. Seeta said that when she used the word dolari, and says, it means beloved, it comes to my mind that, that over here, we say that somebody who shows excessive love to a child, you give him too much a dollar. And we also say that, a dollar ke beta is a spoiled boy child. So it was very, very moving because, I've heard some stories from my grandmother about experiences in the sugar estates. I'm yet to write about them, but thanks to Dr. Seeta, I think I will do a story or two from what my grandmothers told me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I liked your use of dialogue, which is carrying the story to a great extent. Powerful rendering of the dialogue and equally powerful reading by you of the piece. Like Moti, the language, it was nice to hear words that we identify with. Chop up, we don't say chop up, we say chop up. People from the country now, where the country tongue, they say chop up. And proper, well, we don't say proper, but it's nice to hear that phrase, proper. Speaking language like this, proper, talking proper. I like that. And the third thing I would make comment on is the similarity of that social phenomenon that you have and we have across there and here, where you chop up and you drink poison for infidelity. You know, when you had to confront infidelity, or you chop up and then you drink poison, or well, now we don't chop up and drink poison, we shoot and shoot. So we have taken it a notch. It's terrible. It's terrible having to deal with this social phenomenon that we have to deal with. Okay, that's my.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing those nuances and similarities.
I just like to say that it seems as though anywhere you go, where indentured workers came from India, stories are basically the same. You know, the background stories. We have so much. No matter what stories we give out there, you could just identify with some part of it. You know, because you know it went on in your area. It went on with your ancestors, and you would have heard of it and remembered it. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we need to document some of these stories. And as it was Vishnu who said it, Vishnu or Mrs. Samaroo, put your stories out there. And Motilal, sorry, this was Motilal. The thing is, we need to write it for future generations. Right. I could only, the reason I'm able to document this is because my grandmother, my mother, my great grandmother make sure that her children knew all the stories, and my grandmother actually physically walked the stories and make sure that my mom knew the stories. And then my mom didn't do that. She walked into in the footsteps of her mom, and then she traced the roots of her grandmother. And writing it down. I'm the first person to actually put it in writing. And unless one of us take that opportunity and put it in writing, because we can do it now, they couldn't, we can. And our future generations, my nieces, my nephews, they want to read this, they want to know, because they only know societies as it is now in the urban areas, in the big cities and all of that. They cannot think about like the oven that you were speaking about, and how sweet that food tasted, having been cooked in that oven, in that traditional oven. They don't have that experience. And unless they come back, let's say to a JAG, to one of one of our religious functions that uses that traditional, in Guyana you would find it on the East Coast in the villages. They would have a wedding and you would come the night before and you would see the men cooking on the big fires you could also find the fireside in Legwan. I found the traditional fireside. I found the people actually making curry on a traditional fireside. Upstairs they had their gas stove and electric stove or what have you, but downstairs they were cooking on the traditional fireside with the traditional utensils. And unless our children, if our children cannot, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren cannot have that personal experience themselves, they can read about it. And they could actually feel it and taste it and hear it through our voices as written.
Thank you. That's so true. Thank you. Okay, if there are...
Before you go on, one final question. In the interview, Vishnu mentioned the Demerara series. Is Latchmini one, or is it the second one, or the third one?
Latchmini is the first in the Demerara series. I had finished the second one before right before starting the first one, but I published the first one and I'm going to rewrite the second one.
Okay.
Yeah. And the third one actually leads out. The third one is of the Demerara series, is my own mom and my father, who spent most of his adult life in Trinidad and in the Caribbean, in Petty Valley, actually.
Yeah.
And Port of Spain, because he was staying by the oh my
Samaroo.
goodness. Yeah. Anyway, he was staying at the hotel. He was actually living at one of your hotels, Breton Hall. Breton Hall. He was actually living downstairs at Breton Hall's hotel for throughout my before I was actually a teenager. To go see Daddy, you had to go to Breton Hall.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your shares. If we have no other questions, move along. It's a hard one to follow. So I'm going to change the mood a bit and share a poem. And of course, feedback. This is a piece that I've been working on, I think, since Christmas. So I welcome all feedback. It's simply titled Room 217. Lost on Charlotte Street, you found me somewhere between existing and living. Your foreign tongue gave you an openness that challenged mine. Your whiteness made your not knowing funny instead of stupid. Your confidence made you seem all-knowing, but you couldn't follow a simple map. You laughed at hearing White Christmas on an 85-degree day. Sun scraping its teeth on your skin, you announce, it doesn't feel like Christmas. As if in some way the plastic tree is impersonating the season. I take you outside on the balcony, both wearing nothing but boxers, as the cool evening breeze, 17 floors up, apologizes sweetly for the angry heat of the day. I wrap my arms around your sweaty body, kiss your shoulder, place my ear to your back, and let the deepness of your voice reverberate through me. As you assessed our living. In bed, you count my chest hairs, running your fingers through me as I tell of how it always rains on Christmas. The gray days, the cool evenings, the feelings non-locals miss on their exotic holiday. You wrap your tongue around me like gift paper. I am your Christmas present, you whisper. And you feel like my vacation on your vacation. Oblivious, you pull from my hand in a crowded Christmas market. I think quickly and touch your arm, then point to local art, to sorrel chutney, picking up a handmade jeweled cheesed knife, cutting you, but smiling at the vendor, who's smiling at your pockets. You couldn't hide your cringe when I laughed away, you offering me a taste excitedly of your pastel. At first glance, it's like tamales, but it's not. You say, returning your fork to the mouth, I will kiss hard. Let your mustache scratch my lips later, as if to say sorry. That's my offering, and feedback is welcomed.
Yes. You know, we could always trust Gershia that sometimes when we start to get indulge in these tales of long ago to bring us back into modern times, and with such a spicy tale that and I like there's a bit of ambiguity in there that I like it. It sets me thinking. I don't know if it was intentional, Gershia.
It it wasn't supposed to be. I didn't want to make it. And I've been trying to work at bringing, working on the male voice.
Okay.
So you would let me know if that came through.
Yes, yes.
If I still sound like a girl telling a love story.
Yes, it was very well done, and thanks for sharing.
Krish,
Yeah.
significance of the number of that room, girl? 217? Room
No,
217? Huh?
I do. The line that I fumbled on, it said 17 floors up. Came out sounding like 70. And so I just
no, I
put
heard the 17 floors up.
as a title
Yeah.
holder.
Sorry?
I just put
Sorry?
217 as a title holder.
Oh,
To
okay.
just hold. Because I don't as yet have a title for the piece.
Okay.
Well, maybe you can call it a lovey-dovey poem on the 17th floor.
Considering all options right now, but it's supposed to be a piece of two guys.
Oh,
And
two guys, okay.
yeah, so then that means, yeah, I do have to work on the male voice.
Wow.
That he met him while, I guess, on holiday. So he's showing him around. So I wanted to get the nuances of that.
Okay.
I think that is what I meant, you know, Gershia, when I said that you bring us back into modern day living.
Okay.
And then with the reference to the food,
Mhm.
I don't know if the message you want to tell us is that this type of relationship could be spicy. Thank
No,
you.
what I was trying to do was show that they were in Trinidad and show the cultural, you know, I want to show that I want to show the culture, but I also want to show culture vultures in a way. And that's why I brought on the food, because I want to speak of the inequity of power that is just natural in that type of meetup. And it's something that I'm playing with a lot of course, what can't be just spelled out. Even rereading the piece, I'm noticing I'm doing a lot of telling because I keep saying you couldn't cringe, and you know, you said, so I know that needs a lot of work. All right, if there are no,
Tell us something.
sure.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay. All righty. So we are going to go ahead and move on to our next share. Shahira, sorry. She'll be reading she'll be reading a piece, Blanche by Alisa Jankie.
Let's begin. Blanche was ecstatic. Her mother told her that she was allowed to swim with the fishes and go to the surface. She warned her not to let the humans see her. A school of guppies passed by the cave. Blanche followed them. She loved their tiny, colorful bodies. As they passed the pool's bed, she saw giant Seeta feeding off scraps and moss, keeping the pool clean. Her mother used to tell her stories about the surface, but forbade her to go until she was old enough. Her mother and aunts defended Blanche and the other young mermaids fiercely. They ensured that Blanche and the other mermaids were not seen by men. As Blanche neared the surface, she heard voices. She dared not to go further because she was afraid it might be the humans. Mother said humans were cruel and primitive. If they saw her, they would come hunting. And once the mermaids were found, they would be killed. So poor Blanche had an innate fear of humans. Gently, she lingered near the surface, taking caution not to emerge above the pool. She heard the musical sounds of the waterfall in the distance. Quietly, she raised her head, looking in the direction of the voices. She saw a group of humans. Some had beautiful, flowing hair like her and her sisters and cousins. Some were tall and large with short hair. She hurried back to the cave because she didn't want them to see her. She thought she would tell Mother how she arrived and heard voices and she saw a group. However, their backs were turned. Then she decided against it. If Mother knew that humans were around, she might say no. Nothing bad happened, and Blanche's curiosity got the better of her. She wanted to go to the surface at night. If she kept her secret from Mother, Mother would let her go. Night came, and Mother allowed Blanche and her sisters to go to the surface. Blanche's heart pounded as she eagerly swam towards the moonlight. She decided she would take a different direction from her sisters. As she emerged from the pool, she was greeted by the most beautiful sight. A huge, luminous moon stood in the sky. The stars were like tiny jewels. "Hello," she heard. She spun around, and standing at the rocks was a tall, muscular man in shorts. Hastily, she dived underwater. The man had seen her. She was so terrified. Mother had warned her. She did not find him frightening, but Mother said, and just like that, that's it for me on today's episode of Poetry and Prose. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much. I loved it. Any comments? Beautifully read.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to hear more, Shahira. What happened? Upon
Okay.
meeting this
Okay,
person.
Shahira, I sent that piece for Shahira to read because I had that piece from Alisa. And Shahira asked me, that if that's all, if there's more. So
Yeah.
but we have Alisa here. Alisa, are you hearing me?
Hi, good afternoon. You all could hear me, right?
Maybe that question
Yes,
is
we
better put to
Okay.
Alisa. Alisa, we was talking about the sudden end that Derek. I don't know if you
What
want to tell us about it.
Yeah, what happened is that story is I had written that from one of our exercises we used to do when we had the in-person poetry and prose at the Day Bay Library. So we had these writing exercises where you would get 3 words or a phrase, and you had to write a story in 15 minutes. So I think the phrase was swim with the fishes. So the idea that came to my mind was a mermaid. So the story was a little rushed, and the ending kind of gave it a sort of a cliffhanger ending, but I mean, I could see us something further developing later on. So yeah.
Yes, because
Yeah. What happened is yeah, so I didn't revisit some of these short stories to continue them because like I'm working on some other stories as well, and I had started working on um writing up about a repo savanna because I don't really see a lot of literature about a repo savanna. So I had started working on something, but I had gotten very ill at the beginning of this year, so that kind of caused a delay in what I could do and stuff like that. But I would like to thank Shahira for that very lovely reading, and I find like the expression and the way she read it with a lot of feeling and expression, it really gave life to the story. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And I loved those sessions. It's one of my favorite parts of poetry and prose, and that was Motilal's initiative when he first started with those, because they met in the library. And prior to that, we always met in coffee shops, or our last face-to-face session in Shogunas was at a bar. So we had a stage with a microphone, and we had Rahil that used to come in with his music. So that was the personality of poetry and prose in Shogunas, and Motilal, because they met in a library setting. Poetry and prose in Debe Pinal was just so much different. So it was always lovely to visit and get that little writing session. Hopefully, if we have time, we could do that today. Are there any other comments before we move along to Motilal's piece?
Yeah.
I
Yes.
want to just ask Alisa if she has to read first, today. Alisa,
Hi.
will you be sharing us something with us?
Okay. Yeah, I have. Let me
Okay,
just.
well, let's take Krishna's comment and then we
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just to get back to the story that Shahira read. So I was following it as a typical mermaid story. You know the mermaid story. The parents tell you don't let humans see you. There's always this typical thing about humans hostile, and so humans are going to kill you. I was following the pattern and hoping that this mermaid story would have a twist. So I was looking for the twist towards the end there. And when you talked about the moon, how she saw the moon, I said, that is where the twist is coming. But then we went back to the typical thing when you had the muscular, a tall, muscular man. She sees it short. So I just wanted something different from these traditional mermaid stories.
Okay, you know that as Alisa mentioned, that was just a 15-minute, that was the product of a 15-minute writing exercise that we had in the library. And I think we should commend Alisa for producing that quality of work in that 15 minutes. What I want to say too is that many of my stories started in that library with this writing prompt, with a phrase or a few words. And later on, I went on to do a longer story. And I'm sure that Alisa would work on that story again and give us an ending. Thanks, that's my comment.
Can I share a thought?
On the same mermaid story.
Sure, go ahead.
Good. So I love the concept of writing about our folklore as it relates to mermaids. And in Guyana, there are quite a lot of folklore. Well, I shouldn't say quite, there are a lot of folklore relating to mermaids. I myself had written a short story from a mermaid a while back, and I turned it into a dance drama, into a ballet. And that was and we had musicians who composed the music for the ballet and dance and the concept of the mermaid and the folklore as regards mermaid and the remote village concepts. That was what I was trying to get over in my ballet, in my short story. Then it became a ballet. And we have in Guyana, Suriname and French Guyana, the Inter-Guyana Cultural Festival. So I took that ballet and rewrote it slightly to meet the national steel orchestra of Guyana and the national dramatists and everything, and they were able to. And of course, I directed. I prefer to direct my own work, so I was able to get that story shared with Suriname and French Guyana on stage with the dramatists and the dancers and the musicians and everything. So I think the concept of the mermaid is unlike some think that the concept of mermaid comes from Europe, but I found that it exists within our African folklore, it exists within our Indian folklore with coastal villages, and thereafter it exists within Guyana, and I'm sure it exists within Trinidad on the coastal villages and Tobago, and so that's just my 3 cents. I love the concept of the mermaid.
Thank you for your comment and your share. Any other comments? Okay, so we will move along to Motilal. He'll be reading the business plan.
Thank you, Gershia. You know, I had planned to read the businessman, but while Shahira was reading, this Phagwah truck passed by me. I don't know, most of us should know what about Phagwah and the Phagwah truck. It seems as if they are having a little competition going down on the Rock Road side there, so that the truck pass and the people with all the abuse and on the back of the truck and the big speakers and the singing. So that make me feel to want to read another story called Phagwah Tales, if I may. Yes, are you hearing me, Gershia?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. There was a bit distortion before, but I don't know if that was just me or everyone.
What I was saying is that while I'm over this, you hear me good still now?
Yes.
My internet.
Try taking off your camera, Motilal. I believe that perhaps maybe.
Yes, I'll try that. Yes. Okay, hear me better now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so as I was saying that while Shahira was reading, this Phagwah truck, just with the people, the plane singing Chautal, passed by me, and you know, it tells me I think I should read this one about Phagwah instead. I just get that feeling, if I may.
Certainly.
Okay, here goes. Phagwah is a Hindu festival that celebrates the end of the old year and the beginning of the new year. While in its original form, it was a fertility festival, it has lost that aspect in Trinidad and Tobago, although many young men and women still use the occasion to meet and woo their boyfriends and girlfriends at the various celebrations and competitions in Trinidad. It is now commemorated as a day of color and joy on the full moon in March, with songs called chautal and the spraying of colored dye called abir, as well as the rubbing of colored powder called gulag on the faces of cheeks of participants. People danced to the beat of handheld cymbals called majiras and the beating of drums that accompany the chautal songs. The day is one of music and merriment, and it is sometimes referred to as the Indian Carnival in Trinidad. Growing up in a Hindu home and attending a Hindu primary school, I learned about the various Hindu festivals and religious observances, including Ram Navami, Ekadasi, Hanuman Jayanti, Shivratri, Raksha Bandhan, Kartik, and especially Diwali and Phagwah. At school, stories taken from the holy books like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata were used to point out the significance and origin of these festivals and the lessons we could learn from them. We all loved these sessions, which were usually held in the period just before lunch and carried no arithmetic problems or difficult spelling words. Phagwah, for example, was especially loved. We listened to the songs, got to sing and clap, and were given majiras to play. Sometimes we'll go outside under the mango tree in the schoolyard to practice our chautal singing so as not to disturb the rest of the school. The story of Phagwah was about a king named Hiranyakashipu. He was once a great devotee of God and who granted him a boon that he could not die during the night or day at the hands of man or animal or by any man-made weapons or inside or outside his palace. Believing himself to be invincible, he felt he was greater than God and instructed all the people in his kingdom to worship him instead of God. His arrogance grew and he became wicked and cruel, often killing those whom he thought were still praying to God. His sister, Holika, his chief follower and admirer, also received a gift from the gods, a magical orni that once worn on her head would protect her from fire, drowning, pain, and any assault on herself. She too became arrogant, for she thought that she had become immortal. Hiranyakashipu's son, Prahalad, a child, disagreed with his father and worshipped God. His father and aunt felt that he was influencing the people in the kingdom to return to God and eroding their control. They devised a plan to kill him. His aunt Holika would embrace him and sit in the fireplace with her orni on her head for protection. Prahalad would be burned to death and Holika would emerge unharmed. Well, God summoned a gust of wind, which blew Prahalad from her grip and also a magic orni from her head. Prahalad was saved and Holika was burned to ashes. Hiranyakashipu was enraged. He decided to do the job himself. One evening, he summoned Prahalad and began choking him. "Let your God save you now," he mocked. God, seeing his devotee in trouble, took the form of Narsingh, the mythical half-lion, half-man. It was twilight when he took Hiranyakashipu to the eve of the palace, so they were neither inside nor outside, and it was neither day or night. With his claws, which was not a man-made weapon, he killed the wicked king. The lesson we learned was to accept God's gifts with humility, not to become arrogant and forget God, and to act with fairness to all around us. Now, during my school days, I followed my Hindu religion consciously, fasting before pujas, going to temple, making offerings of water and flowers every morning at the chandis, praying 4 times a day at school, and just before going to sleep. Before common entrance, my mother had a special puja at home, and the entire class performed puja at the Puzzle Island Temple near our school, praying for success, for this was the only chance for us to attend secondary school, as most of our parents could not afford to send us to private schools. When I alone passed, I was very happy. but I became arrogant. I stopped talking to my best friend, who was much brighter than me, but was unsuccessful. I misbehaved in class, as I knew I'd be heading for high school soon. I even took trust of the Anchara lady and left school without pay. When my mother wanted to do a puja, thanking God for my success, I sneeringly said, I wrote the exam, not God. In high school, when exposed to science and learning about Darwin's theory of evolution, I became an atheist. Still, success continued to come my way. I passed my exam and secured one of the most prized jobs, a refinery operator at the Texaco Point of View refinery. I completely forgot God, thinking that I alone was responsible for my success. With my new job, I was able to buy a car and was soon lining with my buddies from work, ignoring my friends, now former friends from my village. I have started drinking and along with my workmates, started visiting the nightclubs and the houses of ill repute, such as the Black Cat Hotel, Quintals, and Villa Capri in San Fernando. My mother and former teachers tried talking to me, but to no avail. It was Phagwah 1971 when my mother asked me not to drink and come home, as the village Phagwah group was coming to our house that evening. Needless to say, I paid her no mind. Earlier, I had my fill at CDLs in Debe and even had a ganja cigarette. I could see the pain in my mother's eyes as I came home staggering at 5 p.m. I refused her offer of food and went to my room to sleep. I had dark curtains, for I worked shift and also slept during the day. I put the fan on and quickly dozed away. I was not sure if I was asleep or awake. The room became pitch black as I felt this heavy weight on my chest. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I tried to get up, but was unable to do so. I felt an eerie presence in the room. I wanted to say a prayer, but none came to my mind. And even so, my lips refused to move. I saw and felt Hiranyakashipu squeezing the life out of me, but I was helpless. I was sweating profusely as I tried to will myself to wake up. I watched myself being attacked even as I lay in bed. The scene faded, and then I was being held by Holika in the middle of the soaring flames. This is the end, I thought. Suddenly there was a shout from downstairs our home. Bolo Ramachandra ki Jai. As if by magic, the room became brighter. Holika disappeared and the weight on my chest abated. The Phagwah group had arrived and began singing praises to the Lord. I woke up cold sober and suddenly felt a great urge to join my former village friends in singing the Phagwah songs. I hurriedly took a bath and joined. Everyone was surprised. My mother, most of all. I felt all the songs coming back to me. Holy chale Raghubira, Yawar mein holy chale Raghubira. Holy chale Raghubira, Yawar mein holy chale Raghubira. I sang lustily as I played my jira. Panikhatna ja, chaila simare amon sawila. Panikhatna ja, chaila abira simavela. I sang again and again as I felt so grateful for God saving me. I stopped drinking, stopped liming and visiting those wicked places. I started mingling with the village folks, going to the temple on Sundays, obeying my parents, and most of all, praying to God. God had given me another chance of living good, for which I am grateful to this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Motilal. Always a story. Anyone would like to comment, please?
I'd just like to say to Mr. Motilal, it was not Hiranyakashipu who sat on your former arrogance, it was Narsingh. It was Vishnu's incarnation that sat there, just like what he did to Hiranyakashipu. And that is why things change for you. What do you think?
Thank you, Vilma. Whatever it happened, it did cause a change in my life.
Do you mean it's actually a true story?
Yeah,
Mr. Booth?
when I get this work in Point of View, I was a real, I don't know what kind of fellow I was, you know.
Yeah, the baptism then. Right.
Indeed.
I took it as true, you know. Vish, I
Like-
took it as a true thing, you know. Yeah. That he had this epiphany that happened during Phagwah. And that is why Phagwah is dear to him. Or
Yep,
will
yep.
always be dear to him.
Yes, you know,
Hence the peace.
this morning when I went temple, there was we had a little katha about Phagwah. And in my temple, when I say my temple, I usually attend. We have already constructed Holika, and tomorrow we have some Phagwah singing and the burning of Holika and all that. So I think because when I at school, you know, I thought that I know God, but it changed for me, thankfully. Okay, it seems as if my internet giving a bit of trouble here.
No, we're hearing you. Okay, if there are no other
Yes,
comments.
Yes, Gershia, you called me there, but Lisa was standing by, you know. So I don't know if you want to.
Yep, we have Alicia next. Okay, Alicia, if you would like to share your piece, it says to be announced. So.
Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is a short story I wrote in 2017. It's a paranormal story, and you know, so here goes, right? She stood in the forest with the sacrifice. The spirits would not appear unless some offering was made. After all, why would they give something for nothing? Her something was a big something. This would change her life if she got it. It was not something, but rather someone. He was the only one she could see herself with forever. But she had to be sure, not of herself, but of him. She was used to casual relationships, nothing of substance. Men took what they wanted and left her. Her body was just another stop. They were not there to stay permanently, but to refresh themselves and move on to another. However, this man was different. He wanted a permanent partner, but she had competition. There were other women in his life that he valued. What if? That question haunts many women. The seed of paranoia is oft more powerful than the forest of trust. What if? What if he doesn't want me? What if he wants her? What if he leaves me for her? What if he stays with her forever? What if he never gets to be with me? It boils down to me and her. So she stood in the forest waiting for them, waiting for the entities that would grant her wish, waiting for them who would ensure that she got what she wanted. She needed a guarantee, and soon she would have one. Yes, speak, child, say what you desire. A white woman appeared. She was so beautiful and so white, whiter than the clouds, whiter than white paint. Her lips were blue as the sky, though, and her eyes sparkled with satanic red flames. She smiled, but her eyes were on fire. For a moment, Marianne was afraid. Yes, she was petrified. She wanted to see them, but did not envision them to be so intimidating. I want him to love me and be with me, Marianne blurted out. He must not love Samantha. Only me, she thought. She gently presented her sacrifice, a pure white pigeon. Only me, she kept thinking over and over. Throw some of the blood in his food and present to him, said the entity, her dreadful smile causing her eyes to cast a look of unimaginable evil. She would do anything for him. Yes, anything. Anything that will make him stay. He must never leave me, or else I would die, she thought. One more thing, announced the spirit. Marianne turned around. You must serve him the food during the full moon and ensure that you make love to him right away, or else he will never be yours. That diabolical smile again, she shivered. Yes, she tried to smile, but those demonic eyes. She hoped that it worked this time because she did not want to have to return to summon these entities. Food, lovemaking, they had done it before. She was most experienced, so that was nothing. She entered the apartment. He would be here soon. The time was approaching. She had to act now, or else he would never be hers. That witch, she thought of Samantha. She's such a witch. She better not touch him or have anything to do with him. While she was planning and plotting, Samantha was having these dreams. Were they good dreams in that they warned her? Or were they bad dreams because of their disturbing content? In her dreams, there were dead pigeons, white women, forests with witches whose eyes had no pupils, and the full moon, all taking place in deep south Trinidad. Something was happening. She better be careful. Pray. She said the Our Father prayer, then prayed Psalm 121. Saint Michael, defend us in battle. Be our safeguard against the wickedness and sneers of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do you, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who wander throughout the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Whatever was happening, she had to protect herself. Marianne prepared the food as it should be in the light of the full moon. The light of the full moon sent its blue rays into her apartment. He would be here at 8 p.m. Why was she so nervous? Everything was going to be set into place after this. Now for his presence, that was all she was missing. When Chad announced he was getting married to Marianne, everyone looked at each other. Marianne was oblivious to the bewildered eyes that stood everywhere in the room. Samantha hoped that her smile hid her disappointment. She was not the only one. Behind the superficial congratulations, everyone asked one question in their minds. Why? Chad and Marianne were totally opposite. He was reserved, cautious, dignified. She was extroverted, attention-seeking, crass, loudmouth, uncouth, and streetwise. Her experience with men was no secret. Chad was only too young, only 25. In this modern time, people married later on. He could have waited. Then again, who were they to say anything? Marianne was perceived as manipulated. What about her reputation? Marianne was living her dreams. Momentarily, the red eyes flashed in her memory, but it was worth it. He may or may not have been hers. She could not let Rodney know she was getting married. Rodney might tell Chad everything. She and Rodney had a sporadic relationship. At first, she thought she loved him, and by she realized that nothing serious would emerge. Rodney wanted her on his terms, and she would have to be there when he wanted. When he grew weary of her, he would dismiss her and look for another. She did not want to be with Rodney anymore. This wedding could not be ruined. She had done so much to get him. She did not want to summon the woman from the forest. She did not want to behold the pits of Hades glaring at her from the enemy's eyes. Marianne was beaming. She did not care what people thought. She now had Chad all to herself. As Santa was concerned about her situation, Marianne was delighted in her wedding. Chad was slightly worried. What was happening to him? He loved Samantha as a friend, but sometimes he wondered if there was more to what he felt about her. In any case, Marianne, didn't he? They were great friends and had similar interests. Nah, he was doing the right thing. Samantha was dreaming again. She saw a beautiful woman clad in white. Suddenly, the dress became black. The woman was still beautiful, but those eyes bore a vision of hell. Samantha awoke, panic-stricken. She had to say her prayers again. She could not understand those petrifying dreams. Was someone doing witchcraft to her? What was God trying to show her? The story is a little bit long, right? So I'll just cut to the last paragraph, right? Chad and Marianne got married in the church. Chad was not happy. Something tore at his mind, but he could not understand what it was. Samantha was asked to go on a date by Terry. She had been in love with him for so long. She knew that this was what she wanted. Eventually, Samantha was happily married. For Chad, it was not so happy. The end. Okay, sorry to ram through the story like that, but it was kind of long, and I see it's like 2:57, so I don't want to keep back you all too long.
No, it was a riveting story. Any comments?
You know, Alisa, do a story remind me of you know, their wedding and all this kind of thing. You know, she used to be at Poetry and Prose, the geography poet and tales of trepidation. So she always lives up to her reputation. Lovely story, Alisa.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Well, Gershia, it looked like we would not be able to do our do the writing exercise this evening. So if you have anything to say, please do, and then let us close for the evening.
Okay, so there isn't enough time to do the writing exercise because we're almost at 3:30. So at 3 o'clock, sorry. It's 2:58. So I guess we will have to card that for our next session, or perhaps I'll post it in group. Would you like to do the vote of thanks, Motilal, or would you like me?
Go ahead, Gershia. My video not working good. My internet giving trouble.
Yeah, I keep freezing as well. Okay, so we would like to thank everyone for coming out to Poetry and Prose today. Poetry and Prose is a very small grassroots group. The poets, writers, authors that come together in this space to share our work, to share and discuss the work of others. And we appreciate you visiting, attending, and for everyone that comes every time we have a meeting. Thank you so much for coming. Your participation is invaluable to us. I would like to thank Zorina for inviting Dr. Shah to be with us today to discuss her work. I know we cannot wait until we're able to get a copy in Trinidad of her work. It was very interesting. Thank you to Alicia for sharing your work to be shared and for sharing with us today. Thank you, Vishnu, for being a wonderful interviewer. You really brought the questions, and it was a nice interview to listen to. Thanks to everyone that took the time to give feedback to our work. Colleen, okay. There's nothing better than getting feedback from other writers. You know, your family and friends will always tell you, oh, that's great, great job, love it. But another writer will be able to point out what can be worked on your piece and give you, you know, feedback that you can utilize. So that's the beauty of these sessions. Hopefully we will clod for the next open mic, some space to be able to produce work. And with that, I would like to thank everyone again for being here and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Gershia, and just a little heads up, you know,
Bye.
our next session